Welcome to the Silent Screams, where every story you'll hear is drawn from the shadows of reality. True accounts whispered through time of the things that watch us when we think we're alone. If you love exploring real horror, haunted places, and chilling true stories from around the world, then stay with us. Because once you enter this world, you'll never look at the dark the same way again. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice keeps the stories alive, and your curiosity keeps the darkness listening. Now, turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and let's begin tonight's story.
The wind outside the Chicago skyline had a way of howling through narrow alleys, carrying the city's secrets in its echo. When Lena Carter stepped out of her car and looked up at the old redwood apartments, she thought it looked tired, a relic from the 1960s, its brinks weathered, windows stained by decades of storms and smoke. But rent in the city was brutal, and for a traveling nurse with rotating shifts, the price felt like mercy. Apartment 9A was small, just one bedroom, but clean enough. The landlord, a stout man named Mr. Tully, smiled too wide when she signed the lease. "It's quiet here," he said. "Good for people who work nights." That night, Lena unpacked her things under a flickering kitchen light. Every sound felt louder than it should. The hum of the refrigerator, the pipes groaning, the faint vibration of the L train blocks away. Yet beneath all of it there was something else, a soft tapping, distant, irregular. She paused, thinking it was from upstairs, but when she looked up, she realized the ceiling above her bedroom was empty. The 10th floor had been sealed off years ago. Later, while brushing her hair before bed, Lena noticed something odd. The hallway light outside her door dimmed for a second, and a faint shadow moved past the peephole. She froze. "Probably another tenant," she muttered, trying to sound calm even to herself. But she hadn't seen anyone else in the corridor since she moved in. At midnight, as she lay awake listening to the hum of the radiator, that feeling returned, the heavy sense that someone was standing just outside, watching through the thin walls. She told herself it was nerves, the exhaustion of hospital work, the new environment. Yet for the first time since moving to Chicago, Lena couldn't fall asleep. By her second week in the apartment, Lena's exhaustion began to blur the line between dream and waking life. Night shifts at the hospital left her drained, but sleep never came easily, not with the noises that began creeping through the walls. It started subtly, a faint rustle, like paper brushing against plaster. Then came the whispers, soft, hushed, and rhythmic, as if someone was having a conversation just inches behind her bed. At first, she thought it was a neighbor. The walls were thin, and every sound seemed amplified in that old building. But as the night stretched on, the voices grew clearer. A man and a woman, whispering words she couldn't understand. Sometimes there were footsteps pacing slowly, stopping whenever she tried to listen closer. Other times, a strange scratching, like fingernails dragging lightly across wood. One night, half asleep, Lena gathered the courage to knock on the wall. Knock, knock, knock. A pause. Then, 3 knocks back. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. The air felt electric, charged with a silent warning. She told herself it was plumbing, or the heat expanding through old pipes. But deep down, she knew the difference between metal and skin. The next morning, she invited her friend Dana to visit. Over coffee, Lena tried to laugh about it. there's probably a weirdo next door, or maybe the walls are haunted. Chicago's full of old buildings like that." They both laughed, but Lena noticed how Dana's smile faltered when the vent rattled above them. That night, Lena left her phone recording on the dressing before she went to bed. When she played it back the next morning, she expected to hear nothing but static. Instead, the audio caught a faint whisper. Her name, Lena. Her stomach turned cold. She checked the walls, the vents, even the hallway, but no one was there. The apartment next door, 9B, was silent, its door sealed with a rusted chain. Still, that night, when she lay in the dark, the whispers returned. This time, they didn't come from behind the wall. They came from inside her room. It was always around 3 a.m. when it started, that haunting hour between dream and waking life, when the world seemed to hold its breath. Lena had grown used to restless nights, but on this one, something different stirred her awake. At first, she thought it was the whispering again, but then she noticed it, a faint white glow bleeding through the gap beneath her front door. It wasn't the yellow light of the hallway fixtures. This was cold, almost silver, and it pulsed as if alive. She sat up in bed, heart thundering in her chest. The apartment was silent, save for the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant groan of pipes. Yet that light continued to flicker softly, rhythmically, like someone breathing just outside. "Hello?" she whispered. No response. She grabbed her phone, its flashlight trembling in her hand, and stepped toward the door. Through the peephole, she expected to see an empty corridor, maybe a security light left on, but instead, she saw an eye. A single bloodshot human eye staring directly back at her through the glass. Lena screamed and stumbled backward, slamming her shoulder against the wall. The glow vanished instantly, leaving the apartment in suffocating darkness. She called 911 with shaking fingers, struggling to form coherent words. The dispatcher's calm voice grounded her only slightly. "Officers are on their way, ma'am. Stay inside. Don't open the door." When the police arrived 15 minutes later, they found nothing. The hallway lights were steady. The security cameras showed no one entering or leaving the floor during that time. One of the officers, a tired-looking man in his 40s, gave her a sympathetic look. "These old buildings mess with people," he said. "Bad wiring, bad lighting. You probably caught your own reflection." But Lena knew what she saw. That eye wasn't hers. It blinked too slow, too deliberate. That night, she pushed a chair against the door and slept with every light on. But just as she began to drift off, the faintest shimmer of white crept across her ceiling, like a ghost of that same glow, dancing silently above her bed. And in the reflection of the TV screen, she thought she saw the outline of a face, smiling just beyond the frame. For the next few days, Lena tried to convince herself it had all been exhaustion, a trick of nerves and sleepless nights. She started leaving the TV on for background noise, humming faintly while she prepared for work, anything to drown out the silence that filled apartment 9A. Yet the quiet had a way of pressing in, like a heavy fog. The hallway always felt colder near her door, and sometimes she caught the faint smell of something metallic, like old blood or rusted pipes. Then, one Thursday morning, she noticed something strange. A folded note lay on the floor, half slipped under her front door. She frowned. The handwriting was uneven, the ink smudged as if written in haste. 3 words. "If you hear them, don't answer." Signed, App 9. Lena froze. Apartment 9? There was no apartment 9. Her door read 9A,
and the next one down the hall was 9B, which, according to the landlord, had been empty for years. Still, she felt a strange pull to confirm it for herself. She walked down the narrow hallway, the old carpet muffling her footsteps. Apartment 9B looked wrong. The door was sealed shut, the metal lock covered with layers of city tape that read, "Condemned, do not enter." The doorframe was warped, paint peeling in long, curling strips. Someone had scratched a word into the wood near the handle. C. Her pulse quickened. She turned to leave, only to find Mr. Tully, the landlord, standing at the far end of the corridor. His eyes were wide and tired. "You shouldn't be near that door," he said sharply. "That unit's been closed for years." "Then why is someone living there?" Lena shot back, showing him the note. He looked at it, his jaw tightening. "People around here like to play jokes," he muttered. "Forget about it." But his voice cracked, betraying unease. That night, Lena placed the note on her nightstand, unable to throw it away. The words gnawed at her. "Don't answer." Around 2 a.m., the tapping began again, slow, deliberate. This time, it wasn't coming from the wall. It was coming from her front door, accompanied by a whisper that seemed to breathe her name. "Lena, open up." She sat frozen in the dark, staring at the doorknob as it began to turn, softly, back and forth, though no one's supposed to live in apartment 9. By the following week, the air inside Lena's apartment had changed. It carried a foul, creeping odor that clung to everything, her sheets, her clothes, her skin. At first, she thought it was something small, like spoiled food or damp garbage in the building's chute, but the smell was sharper than that, heavier, like a mix of rot and iron. It grew stronger every night, curling through the vents no matter how many candles she lit. She called the building manager twice. The second time, a young maintenance worker named Eli came by with a flashlight and a face mask. "Probably a dead rat in the walls," he said, prying open a vent grill. But when he shined his light inside, the beam reflected off something wet, a dark smear glistening deep in the duct. He leaned closer, then recoiled, coughing. I don't know what that is," he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. "I'll get someone to check the next unit." The next unit? 9B. An hour later, Eli returned, pale and silent. He refused to meet Lena's eyes. "Can't access it," he said. "Doors welded. Nobody's been inside in years." "But the smell's coming from there, isn't it?" He hesitated, then whispered, "Don't ask questions about that place. Just keep your windows open at night." That evening, the odor seemed to shift, moving toward the corner of her bedroom where her closet stood. When she opened it, she nearly gagged. The air inside was thick and humid, and the back wall was damp, as though something on the other side was seeping through. A faint trail of moisture trickled down to the carpet. She touched it with the tip of her finger. It was warm. Her heart hammered in her chest. She scrubbed her hands until they stung, but the smell lingered on her skin. That night, even after showering twice, she could taste it in the back of her throat, metallic, sour, and unmistakably alive. Around 3 a.m., she awoke to the sound of dripping water, only it wasn't coming from her faucet. It was coming from the closet. The dripping grew slower, thicker, until it sounded more like something viscous falling onto fabric. When she got up and opened the closet door, the smell hit her so hard she choked, and through the darkness, on the damp wall, she saw faint finger-shaped marks dragging downward from the ceiling, as if something or someone on the other side was trying to claw its way through. Sleep had become a distant memory for Lena. Her nights bled into her mornings, her mind fogged with fatigue and dread. The smell in the apartment never truly left. It simply changed, sometimes fading to a faint metallic tang, other times surging so strong that it made her gag. She avoided the closet now, keeping it sealed with duct tape and a heavy chair pressed against the door. But the silence on the other side felt aware, as if waiting for her to make a mistake. It was a cold Sunday evening when she first saw the face. She stood before the bathroom mirror, brushing her teeth, trying to ignore the strange flicker of the ceiling light. The air felt heavier than usual, thick with humidity, though she hadn't showered. Her reflection looked pale, tired, but then, just for a second, it wasn't alone. Behind her, in the reflection, stood a pale shape, just at the edge of the frame, not quite human, not quite shadow, a face, white, hollow, with eyes too wide staring straight at her. She spun around, toothpaste spattering the sink. The room was empty. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. The mirror, still trembling on her movement, seemed to pulse with its own life. The light above buzzed, dimmed, and then steadied again. She leaned forward slowly, staring at herself. "Get a grip," she whispered. But as the words left her lips, her reflection didn't move. It stood perfectly still, its mouth closed. The toothbrush slipped from her hand. A cold, invisible pressure filled the room, pushing against her, suffocating. The reflection's eyes flickered, and for a moment, they weren't hers anymore. She stumbled backward, slamming into the wall, her heart pounding. The light bulb popped, plunging the bathroom into darkness. She fumbled for her phone, its glow casting long, jittering shadows. The mirror now looked cracked, fractured down the center like a wound. But when she examined it closer, the glass was perfectly smooth. The crack existed only in the reflection. That night, Lena covered every mirror in her apartment with bedsheets and towels. Yet even then, she could feel the reflection watching her from under the cloth. Sometimes, in the corner of her eye, she'd see the faint shimmer of movement, a flicker that didn't belong to her. And as she finally drifted into uneasy sleep, the sound of breathing filled the room again. Slow, steady, matching her rhythm exactly, until suddenly it didn't.
The next morning, Lena felt like she'd aged 10 years overnight. Her eyes were bloodshot, her hands trembled, and every sound, every creak of the old floorboards made her flinch. She couldn't take it anymore. The smells, the noises, the reflections, it was eating her sanity alive. She went downstairs to the lobby, determined to find Mr. Tully, but he was nowhere in sight. The front desk was empty except for an old brass bell and a ledger filled with names crossed out in thick black ink. Then from behind her came a low voice. "You're the one in 9A, right?" She turned and saw Mr. Kells, the building's maintenance man, an older man with weathered hands, a limp, and eyes that had seen too much. He was usually quiet, invisible even. Today, his expression carried a strange heaviness. "Yes," she said, cautiously. "I've been hearing things. Smells, noises. I think something's wrong with the place next door." Kells hesitated, glancing toward the hallway that led to the upper floors. "You shouldn't be living up there. Nobody should." When she pressed him, his voice lowered to a near whisper. "That unit next to you, 9B, it's supposed to stay sealed. We've had complaints for years. Every tenant who's lived in 9A, they say the same things. Whispers, smells, the feeling of being watched." He rubbed his temples. "We checked it once, years ago. I was there." He leaned closer, his tone trembling. "We found holes drilled through the shared wall, hundreds of them. Each one pointed straight into the bedroom of 9A. Lena felt her stomach twist. "What do you mean, holes?" From the other side, Kel said, "Someone was watching. The last tenant in your unit, a man named Preston, he called the cops after he woke up to find one of the holes had been filled with an eye looking through it." Her heart stopped,
What happened to him? Kels's eyes darkened. He disappeared before the police could interview him. They broke into 9B a week later, found photographs of every tenant who'd ever lived there, all of them sleeping, some taken from inside the rooms. Lena felt dizzy, gripping the counter for balance. "Who was living there?" she asked, but Kels shook his head. Nobody was supposed to. The apartment's been condemned since 1989. He reached into his pocket, his hand shaking, and pressed something into hers, a small key with a faded tag that read, "Basement Access." "If the noise starts again, don't call for help. Get out through the basement. It's the only way they won't see you." As she stood frozen, trying to understand what he meant, Kels turned to leave. But before he disappeared into the maintenance hall, he added one last thing without looking back. "Whatever's in 9B, it doesn't like being seen." That night, Lena couldn't stop replaying Mr. Kels's words in her mind. Whatever's in 9B, it doesn't like being seen. She kept every light in the apartment burning, lamps, hallway bulb, even the flickering one in the bathroom. The hum of electricity filled the silence, but it wasn't enough to quiet the fear gnawing at her ribs. Every corner of the room seemed to breathe. Every shadow twitched just slightly when she wasn't looking. At 3:17 a.m., the air changed again. Cold, sharper than ice, and the faint smell of iron filled her lungs. Then came the glow. It started as a dim pulse leaking from the crack beneath the closet door. She froze where she sat on the bed. The light brightened slowly, a pale, white radiance that shimmered like moonlight underwater. Her heart pounded as she whispered to herself, "Don't move, don't look." But the light grew stronger, spilling across the carpet, illuminating the edges of the room in trembling beams. The duct-taped closet door began to rattle. The tape peeled away one strip at a time, curling up with a slow, sticky hiss. Then, click. The latch released. The door opened by itself. Inside, the light pulsed violently, and Lena raised her trembling hand to shield her eyes. The walls were no longer damp. They were covered, every inch of them, in drawings of eyes. Hundreds, some small, some large, some weeping streaks of what looked like red ink. The pupils seemed to shimmer, catching the light as if wet. Then, one of them blinked. Lena stumbled backward, crashing into her nightstand. The lamp toppled, the bulb shattering in a burst of sparks. The white glow from the closet pulsed faster, like a heartbeat. Beneath the flicker, she heard a sound, breathing, heavy and close. Then a whisper, "I see you." She screamed, slamming the closet shut, pressing her back against the door as it trembled beneath her weight. The drawing scratched from inside, the sound of fingernails dragging over plaster. For a moment, she thought she heard laughter, soft and low, echoing through the walls of both 9A and 9B. Then, silence. The light vanished as if it had never existed. Lena stayed pressed against the closet until dawn, shaking, unable to move. When morning light finally filtered through her blinds, she dared to open the door again. The walls inside were clean. No drawings, no wet stains, nothing. But carved into the wood of the closet door, deep enough to splinter the surface, were 3 words etched by something not quite human. "You saw me." Lena didn't go to work the next day. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking and her voice quivered whenever she tried to explain what had happened. She called Dana, her closest friend, and begged her to come over. By the time Dana arrived, the sun was sinking behind the Chicago skyline, bathing the old apartment building in a copper gloom. When Lena opened the door, Dana froze at the sight of her. She was pale, eyes wide, pupils dilated, her hair disheveled as if she hadn't slept in days. "You need to leave this place," Dana said immediately. "Whatever's happening here, it's not normal." "I can't," Lena whispered. "There's something in there, behind the wall. I need to see it." At first Dana refused, but the look in Lena's eyes, wild, desperate, convinced her to help. Together they grabbed a flashlight, a hammer, and a crowbar from the maintenance closet downstairs. The hallway outside apartment 9B felt wrong, too still, the air thick like a storm about to break. The yellow light above flickered in erratic bursts, casting long shadows that twitched against the wall. The condemned door to 9B was sealed with heavy metal bolts, and a layer of city tape faded to gray. "We shouldn't do this," Dana muttered, but Lena was already prying at the hinges. Each pull echoed through the hallway like a heartbeat. Finally, with one hard strike, the top hinge snapped. The door opened creaking, releasing a gust of air colder than ice. Inside, the smell hit them first, a nauseating mix of rot and chemical decay. Dust hung thick in the air, illuminated by their trembling flashlight beam. The apartment was bare, stripped of furniture and color, except for a small door in the far wall. A door that shouldn't have been there. They forced it open, and behind it lay a hidden room barely large enough to stand in. Its walls were covered in scratched writing, desperate, carved into plaster with shaking hands. "They see through you. Don't look back. The eyes never sleep." In the corner sat an old film camera, its lens aimed directly at a small hole in the wall, the one connecting to Lena's bedroom. The camera's power light flickered weakly, still on. Dana pressed the playback button. The screen crackled to life. Static, then darkness. Then Lena, sleeping in her bed. The footage was from the night before. Lena's breath caught. She took a step closer, her reflection trembling in the tiny monitor. In the background of the footage, behind her sleeping form, the closet door opened slowly, and a figure stepped out. Tall, hollow-eyed, its face stretched with an almost human smile. Dana dropped the flashlight. The beam rolled across the floor, landing on a set of footprints, dark and damp, leading from the corner of the room toward them. The camera clicked off, and in the darkness, something whispered, a voice neither of them recognized. "You shouldn't have seen me." Lena and Dana ran. They didn't speak, didn't breathe,